Welcome to Digication Scholars Conversations. I'm your host, Jeff Yan. In this episode, you will hear part two of my conversation with Jordi Getman from Bronx Community College. More links and information about today's conversation can be found on Digication's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Full episodes of Digication Scholars Conversations can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast app.
You are about to hear part two of our conversation with Jordi Getman from Bronx Community College. Please be sure to listen to our previous episode to hear part one of this conversation.
Now, I want to spend a little time talking about COVID as well as where you're going next, in terms of your new position and some of the new ideas. I'm sure you're going to have some. I'm going to make the bet that you're going to have some controversial ideas that, um, you know, that only Jordi will come up with. And that's good. I think we need more of that. But one recent conversation you and I had that really inspired me was that you were talking about in this last year, um, your students have been hurt tremendously. Um, New York has been hurt tremendously, the United States and people in general have been hurt tremendously. But your students are probably one of the most disproportionately being hurt, um, and um, and that education in this particular context, we should be thinking about learning, but also healing and taking these other roles in their lives. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I have to thank colleagues of mine at BCC for pushing this more than I ever did. But it's been very difficult as you outlined. It's been very difficult. We got hit really hard in March and April of last year by COVID. Um, I live a couple of blocks away from a hospital, and the sirens were nonstop for 2 months. A lot of our students either passed away or had family members pass away. Same thing with faculty, administration, staff. Everybody was hit hard at some level or another, and because we just didn't know what was happening. And I'm not going to get into that too much at a political level, but um, it did force us to scramble to put together and continue being able to offer as high a quality education as possible for our students. And and that is a lot of work, especially since the first shift to online learning was halfway through the semester. And then, we did have to scramble over the summer. I spent all summer, along with other faculty members, colleagues of mine, training those who had not ever taught online. We really worked really hard and had scratch the bottom of the barrel budget wise to try to find money to fund faculty development programs that didn't exist, had not existed. And so, we were able to train well over 300 faculty in the course of the summer, and it wasn't enough, but it was a huge step in the right direction. But when you're doing all this, going back to your question here, you start to realize that, I mean, we're already at a public institution. You're always pushed to the limit. To then on top of that throw COVID into the mix and having to move online, it's people were just starting to burn out left and right, students as well. And so we a lot of us started to think very seriously about, we can't just keep doing this without thinking about what it is that how it's affecting us, reflecting on it, and then start to try to integrate what you would call sort of restorative practice. But not just, the interesting thing is that, initially you think, well, restorative practice as a way of helping you not burn out because of COVID. But then you start thinking about it, and there's so many different elements that you can bring into restorative practice, and actually a lot of them have to do with our student population. Their cultural and economic realities, background, their economic realities are, they're stressed out on a regular basis. And on top of that, they have to face, as I was mentioning a moment ago, they have to face being stereotyped as underachievers, and they have to deal with all of the sort of there are a number of different elements of alienation, especially from higher learning, or sort of the type of jobs that they aspire to. They're made to feel in many ways that they can't really be part of that group, especially because of their ethnic backgrounds. And so the whole dimension also of institutionalized racism that they're having to face. um, all of this is, we started realizing that a lot of us are actually engaged on a regular basis on in restorative practice, and having sort of teach empowerment through the processing of pain and alienation, instead of using it, having it continue to be something that puts you down. Kind of turn it on its head, and analyze and reflect on what it is that it's doing to you and to your family and to your neighborhood and to your community, and how it is that you can be a transformative figure for yourself, but also then go back into the community and help those around you. So restorative practice is something that actually, we just had a conference. We refer to it as the winter conference. Usually we invite academics, and it's about pedagogy mainly, but we invite presenters from around the area, and within CUNY, but other institutions as well. But this year we thought, let's just make it about it's only our institution, and let's concentrate on rebuilding our sense of um, self and empowerment as faculty, as students. And so we integrated a lot of the different theories that have evolved and emerged among our faculty, and our different colleagues from different departments coming together to really share um, the notion that which is so negative in society could actually be an empowering element, pedagogically, and at a personal psychological level. And it was a wonderful 2-day conference in which we there was a there was one presentation where we all stopped and did on the spot restorative practice. We did yoga, and there was about 70 of us on screen. And I have to tell you, like, that 2 3 minute um uh like shared experience that we all had of like letting go of the pressure. And you could, like, when we all opened our eyes and looked at the screen, a lot of us were actually crying, like tearing up, and we had let go of a lot. It's that kind of sharing, I think, is really important. And you were talking about that earlier, like the element of confidence is important for our students, but as faculty too, we need to have the notion that we can be confident in not knowing enough, confident in trying to figure out new ways of doing things instead of always having to know. I think that's the big error that a lot of us engage in, at least early on in our. I certainly did early on in our careers, to think that we have to know. You don't have to know. Why not have a nice extended conversation with your students where everybody can learn?
I think that's beautiful, by the way. And what a that's something, by the way, that every school could do and should be doing, and take a priority um, in doing so, because I think your students and your faculty and your staff all can benefit from it, and they need it. And where it's not it is an important time for us to get that restorative juice here, because um, it's especially for certain parts of the country and certain parts of the world. We got hit really hard, and it's not a typical year for any of us. um
Yeah, you have to go from well, actually, this was the part of the title of the conference, is like you're going from surviving to thriving. How can you actually take these difficult moments and turn them into something positive? To me, the difficulties, I'm not going to downplay any of them because it's been really hard, but it has moved us out of our comfort zone, a lot of us, to the
Yeah.
point that we're in a continual sort of liminal state. I'm a big believer in sort of threshold concept theory, and the notion of liminality as a way of keeping the door of learning open all the time, so that you're always somewhat uncomfortable with the situation that you're in. Well, the last year has been really uncomfortable, and it's shown us who is really willing to say, I am committed to teaching, and I'm going to do what I need to do to continue teaching my students, because they really are the ones who deserve, um, they deserve all of our attention. That's what they're here for. That's why we teach, and it's been wonderful to see just how many faculty have stepped up.
Mhm.
We have it inside of us, but it's easy, I think, to get into, I wouldn't call it a rut, but certainly into a rhythm of doing similar things semester after semester.
Yeah.
um, to stop and rethink and reevaluate and reflect, right, is incredibly important, and to be open
Yeah.
to our students' comments.
So you promised me that you were going to tell me a little bit more about your thoughts on some of the hidden and visible in reflection.
Yes,
You want to talk about that?
yes,
You want to
yes.
you
I
want to you want to
This is
you
actually,
want
yeah,
to
this
drop
is
some knowledge here for us?
yes, it's actually, a lot of this is by, I feel like, sometimes I feel like, I mean, I feel like a scientist, where you're like trying different things. You don't know what's going to work. You hypothesize that something will or will not work, but then you like have to try it. Every semester I'm trying something new in class, and a number of years ago, early on in, well, it wasn't that early, but within a few years of teaching with ePortfolios, I've always been fascinated by the notion of, reflection that you always, sort of brought forth when we had our early conversations. And I was like, how can I get my students to reflect? Like, one thing is to just ask them a question and then they write it in their ePortfolio and the answer. And then, I saw too much of that going on with other institutions and other colleagues, where it's like, oh, instead of writing it on a piece of paper, they're going to put it on a digital format on an e-portfolio. So, like, to actually engage students in active learning through the process of reflecting on the e-portfolio it's something that, even to this day, I'm not completely comfortable with. I'm always trying to find a better way to have them reflect, because it really has to be, they have to be able to absorb it and feel like they're not just giving it to me for me to grade. And that's why, like, the peer engagement, with the conversations feature on Digication is wonderful, I think, because I can step back and then they can go at it with each other, and they can get their, especially now that you can get updates, notifications when somebody posts something. They're like going, it really has increased, students going back and forth with each other. It's really positive. But what I, um, found by accident, as some scientists stumble on vaccines and whatnot, um, was one semester, I uh, there was a student who was very resistant. This is a hybrid class, so there was a face-to-face part, and he would sit in the back of the class and he wouldn't say a word. And he was a young man, a little, I felt like he was maybe a little too cool for school kind of attitude. But that was me, in a sense, stereotyping him, right? Anyway, he sat in the back, didn't say anything. I would ask him questions in class, wouldn't really answer. And then on his portfolio, he would publish. I would say, like, "Oh, this is the welcome page," and he would. So I told all the students, like, say something on the welcome page to welcome the people who are visiting your portfolio. And so he wrote welcome, and so he was always doing the bare minimum to get by. And then one day, by chance, he had included me as a viewer. I don't think he understood that he had included me as a viewer, and an editor also. So I could actually, when I went to his ePortfolio to look at it, I was seeing the edit view instead of the
So
published
the
view.
unpublished version, the draft.
So yeah, so his draft, right? And the published version, that welcome page just said welcome on it. But when I saw what he was working on, his draft, he had extensive writing, and it was just sort of it was like it was very lyrical too. He was basically writing a song about, his frustrations with the educational system, and how, he was made to feel that he wasn't going to accomplish anything in life. But then he said, I am here. I can't remember the exact words, but he basically, it's like a song he was saying, but hold on to your pants, because I'm going to take you on a ride of reflection. And and it was just, and I was like, wow, why? And then he even had a picture of himself on that page, in which instead of being smug and quiet and sitting in the back, he was like right in front on the selfie that he had taken of himself, and he was actually flipping off. Sorry to do that, but flipping off the camera. So like there was this so much power to that. I was like, wow, what, like, you know, if I had been, I guess, more traditional, but I was like, oh, why is this guy, like giving me the bird? Um, but I was just blown away by how much he was like really engaging with that, and the only person who knew about it was him. And I thought that's wonderful on the one hand, but on the other hand, what do I do with this? So I approached them in class, and I said, I said, listen, I think it's by accident, but I got to see what you're working on when I went to correct your ePortfolio. And he was incredibly embarrassed and like kind of shut down a little bit. And I said, listen, I'm fascinated by what you're doing here. You're writing such lyrical reflections. It's like you're writing songs. And we started talking, and he opened up, and he basically confessed that he's really into music, and that it didn't really like history that much, but this is how he wanted to express himself, but he's uncomfortable doing it in a history class. And I said, well, you know what? Why don't we reach an agreement? We basically talked it out, and I said all of the assignments from here to the end of the semester, take them and then interpret it in song. Like, write. It doesn't have to be a perfect song. Just write some lyrics that engage that historical topic that we're talking about that week. And let me tell you, like, all of a sudden, this guy went from quiet, not wanting to engage, to just, he was writing incredible stuff. Even got to the point that he was engaging in class at during regular class, and by the end of the semester, he came and he said to me, he said, I I didn't like history. I still think I don't like it, but now I found a way to engage it. And we actually, for a few semesters after that, went back and forth with each other. He was, um yeah, I don't know, there's like, there was that he was reflecting on things, and it was almost like he's presenting me the failed side of himself. And it's almost like it was easier for him to just continue being a failure, to like just do the minimum, fly under the radar, because that, going back to what I was saying earlier, the connection between the academic and the personal domain
Yeah.
just didn't make sense to him. Like it doesn't make sense to a lot of people in society. We don't want to allow that to happen, because if we do, then the academic doesn't have the sort of relevance that we've given it, right? Or the privilege that we've given it. So, but I think that that's silly. I think it's, um, the more intellectual we make everything, the better. And the more we recognize that this kid was so smart. I mean, I think it's harder to turn a reflection into song than to, but for him it was easier, right? But then
Right.
it would, for me it would be a lot harder. But I would, so there's a moment where a student who was happy to hide behind failure, actually, I think failure in a sense was a type of resistance for him to the system. and yet I forced him to engage, and then he forced himself to engage, and then he found a new way to express himself. And so failure becomes the first step, not it's not this the last step. This is something that we talk about a lot with our faculty, is failure as a gateway rather than it's the first step towards success. We have to allow our students to fail. Otherwise, if we don't let them fail, if we end the path to success the moment they fail once, then
Yeah.
as they're none of them are going to succeed.
And it really sucks to be a student, um, who you already feel like you are destined to fail already, and if every evidence that get thrown at you is to confirm that, oh yeah, that's where you're heading. um
Yeah,
like, how is it possible for them to feel like there's a sense of, there's a light at the end of this tunnel if I work at it
yeah.
you know
And I think that this is for me. I gave a talk at the conference, and I entitled it "Empathy, Equity, Empowerment." And I was talking about developing. I was trying to reach out, sort of bring my colleagues together in thinking about a Bronx model of learning. Not to say that nobody else can engage in that, but um, we ourselves as an institution also engage in that sort of self-suppression of thinking, hey, we're a community college, so how relevant is what we're doing? We care a lot about our students, but is it really all that um, advanced in the sense of like pedagogical intellectual engagement? And so I would argue that yes, it is. In fact, it's harder to do what we do than it is to teach a lot of privileged institutions. And so the notion of empathy, this is, you were just asking, like, how do you start the process? To me, empathy is the cornerstone. If you can't look at the student, and I mean, you can try to be sympathetic, but that a lot of times turns, in my opinion, to becoming, even if you don't want to, you can become somewhat condescending. You can
yeah.
you can kill your students with kindness. Empathy allows you to try to understand where they're coming from. It doesn't mean that you have to like make it easy on them. It means that you have to try to see where they're coming from. And if you can do that, then you can move on to the notion of equity, which is sort of the milestone. That's the center of what you're doing. You're giving them the tools to empower themselves to then become not just self-sufficient, but very positive um, elements of society. They can be influential, and then we're talking about, I think, a real um, a real like aspirational reaching higher from our students, not just professionally, but intellectually, civically. You know, if you look at the political mess that this country is in, and a lot of the world is in, with populist movements arising everywhere, these populist movements depend deeply in uh, uh, populations being uneducated and unaware of truth versus lies. And so, if we empower our students to be truth seekers and to use that as a cornerstone to what they, truth as a cornerstone to building who they are professionally and personally, then they don't have to lie. They don't have to fail. They don't have to, they can be confident. They can be empowered. And then the sky's the limit. And if you teach at Bronx Community College, you can't go in thinking everybody's a failure. I'm just going to try to get 2% of you through. That's just not, it's a disservice to the students and to your colleagues.
So I can see already, first of all, why you've been tapped to run this, being the inaugural director of online learning at Bronx. And
Right.
um, but as the inaugural director, I'm sure many of the things that you spoke about will permeate through your program, how you structure it, because you have a lot of new ways of being able to do things that you don't have to, stick with whatever that's convention, for you. So that's great. I think it's such a great fit for you. And uh, are there any sort of aspect of that new program that you are particularly excited about, or that you're ready to, share any sort of like here's what we are hoping to do something differently?
Yeah, I think that I mean it's a now that I'm in it, it's a huge lift, and it's going to require rethinking a lot of processes. And there's already established bureaucracies, and whether it be in the academic realm or in the student support realm, there's a lot of good structures that have been built up in the last few months. Um, but it is going to be a lot of hard work, and it's not just me. I mean, everybody has to engage in it at some level if it's going to work. And I hope to inspire them, and they'll inspire me. But the thing that I think is really important is to not just try to have a parallel online program that is a, just a different modality than face to face, or more traditional educational degree programs. But I think that in engaging faculty in creative thought about how to best serve our students online, without actually just without um, thinking, here's another school's approach, here's the traditional adjusting traditional teaching to online modality, without making it simple. Just like it's easy to just say, okay, I'm going to shift over to online and then I'll do the best I can. No, I think that the rethinking of the process, and revisiting and reflecting on one's educational conviction, and pedagogical um, structures that they integrate into their courses, that's a moment, that's that liminal moment I was talking about earlier, that we're all in the middle of at BCC. So I've made a calling out to my colleagues that we should, instead of being afraid of that, really push the limits and figure out where we can go with developing, like I said earlier, a Bronx model of learning. Forget about what everybody else is doing. Let's see what we can do. And along the way, we're going to discover things that work and things that don't work. And we're going to write about it, and we're going to publish it. And we're going to have it be part of the larger conversation about effective online pedagogies. I think that's really important, because if we just do what a lot of us have done for years, which is to develop a lot of creative approaches to teaching and learning at BCC, and then we might go to a conference, present on it, and then come back and just keep doing it. I think it's time for us to take this moment to really build on it as an alternative to a lot of other institutions' approaches to teaching and learning. I don't think that we need consultants to come in and tell. I mean, we don't have money for it right now anyway, but we don't need consultants to come in and tell us how to teach, because every time they've come in, it's been nice. You learn a little bit. But the context, as I was saying earlier, the context in which we teach is so much more important. And so why not allow ourselves to be consultants to our own community, and really push ourselves to be the best that we can be. And then, like I said, we're going to publish, maybe externally, maybe we can create a center for community college research at Bronx Community College. So many centers that do this kind of work are geared towards the consulting route of making money. For us, it's not about making money. For us, it's about developing something that really works. And so, yeah, I think that's. I presented this at the conference, and for the most part, everybody was really happy about it. Once I start pushing them to try to do it, we'll see how happy they'll be. But you
Well,
know what? You
look,
got to do it.
I am incredibly inspired by what it is that you're about to do. I have been inspired by you for the last decade plus, and more. And but I really do think that this upcoming chapter, it's going to be so impactful beyond um, beyond the beyond your students at Bronx, but can I really believe that it can be spread to a much larger audience. And to me, what's so important is that you're addressing a a universal systemic problem, um, and that you are going to basically find a treasure, and that treasure is in your own backyard. um, that's what's going to happen. And I think that the richness of where your students are coming from, and the diversity, in all by in all different ways, right,
Mhm.
um, is going to provide the fuel, for you to discover these things. And I think that's really what is going to come, and you are going to actually have an edge over a more um, sort of uniform looking student body, because you're not gonna, they're not gonna have your advantage.
Mhm.
um, and and I think in many ways, I'm really happy to see that this is what's going to come out of, almost like the phoenix rising out of the COVID years,
Yeah.
that you all had to endure. So uh, I'm so incredibly positive and hopeful to
Yeah.
what you're going to get to
I
do.
hope I hope you're right, Jeff. I mean, I don't think that we can look at it any other way if we're gonna um I don't know. It'd be painful for me to think of just giving up. And I think that I am lucky enough to have a large number of very positive thinking colleagues who are they think very similarly. They walk onto campus when we could walk onto campus, but um, hopefully soon we'll be able to do that again. But thinking about how wonderful our students really are deep down. They're so thoughtful. They're so honest. It's like they're not even, so many of them are not even thinking about all the intricacies of, impressing me as a teacher so that I give them a better grade. They're not really thinking about that. They're thinking about things in a very honest and straightforward manner. And it makes my job, now that I've been doing it for a number of years, it makes my job so much simpler in a sense, because I don't have to, we can get down to business in a very honest way. And I think that that's how, um, you know, I aspire for that to be the case the rest of my career. Otherwise I would get really bored with teaching. It can be a routine that just becomes, I mean, I can't understand when someone doesn't continually rethink what they're going to teach, because the world changes. As a historian, I mean, this last year there's COVID, there's Black Lives Matter, there's an insurrection at the Capitol. um, there's so much to engage students with. But you know what, before that we had, Bronx as a neighborhood to engage students with. We had the realities of living in New York City, and the complexities of stop and frisk uh, policies. And there's always something that you can engage them in a way that it's not foreign. It is real. It is part of their everyday life, and you are there to go through it with them, and you learn, and then can offer them some guidance, some mentoring, and then they learn. And that's, I don't know, I think it's a wonderful, I feel really lucky to be teaching in the Bronx, to be honest with you.
Okay, with that, Jordy, thank you so much, so much, so much for sharing all your insights with us. Uh, I think this is going to be a real classic. I'm gonna, I think I'm gonna watch this or listen to this. Um, I feel like in years to come, especially when we see that center, open, at Bronx Community College, we're going to come back and say, hey, we heard it here first.
Yeah, I hope you're right. It's going to be an uphill battle, but we'll do it. We'll do it.
Yeah,
It's
I,
going to
I
happen.
believe in it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Take care, Jordy, and thanks again for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It's always a pleasure, and I really am. I'm really proud to be part of the family of wonderful academics that you've put together over the years. So I'm proud to be able to call myself your friend. I hope as well. But you've become a friend, and it's something that's to be. I think it's not easy to engage in the business of education and be such good friends at the same time. So thank you so much for everything. It's been wonderful. I'm looking forward to
Well,
the years to come.
yes. Well, same here. Thank you, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, take care.
Digication Scholars Conversations is brought to you by Digication, a technology platform powering the most innovative ePortfolio programs in K through 12 and higher education. Our website can be found at digication.com. This episode was produced by Drew Albanesius and Jessica Chittum. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks for watching.